What up? What's up, motherfuckers? We're just going to take it nice and easy, nice and slow. We have a lot that we need to discuss. We have zero structure, so we don't know how we're going to do this. Now, we've been kind of walking into some new ideas in the story. Why do I say we? Me, I. We, because I watch these videos. These videos are honestly for me, but you guys can watch them if you want to. I didn't really ever plan to have an audience. So, we've been walking slowly into some new concepts. Now, these concepts that I've been kind of trepidatiously, I could say that, exploring. Some of them are a little frightening and not exactly what I've been looking into occult stuff. And I kind of knew beforehand, like, okay, like occult stuff's kind of, everyone warns against it. Okay, so I always had that in my head, like, just be fucking careful with this shit. But then I continued to go through, and some of the occult stuff that I stumbled upon, I said, fuck this. I'm going to utilize demons? Absolutely not. But some of the other stuff that I guess falls under the branch of it seems harmless enough. I don't know. Not really sure. But the major one that I've been really kind of, how would I word this? Like, the one that struck the most, let's say it that way, would be Hermeticism. And I'm not going to sit here and let me tell you what Hermeticism is, as I don't really know. But just the bits that I've heard from it, it makes the most sense to me. In ways of the concept of God and in ways of the Aeon. I guess that they have the understanding of the Aeon. And so I don't know what their understanding is and exactly what the God is to them and how the world works and everything. Something about the mind, manifestation. It just kind of fell in line with all the stuff I've been talking about in these videos. The manifested, the unmanifested, the concept of God, the aeons, and all this other shit. It just fell right in line with what I've been doing. So I thought, well, this is the best one to go with. The exploration of Gnostic/esoteric stuff has indeed been the most fruitful to me. For the longest time, I would search through religion and just not feel like it was adequate for me. For instance, Christianity on a whole, no matter what denomination it happens to be, didn't feel like it had enough substance to it to me. And I don't know why. I couldn't tell you why. Like, I'm not saying this is good or bad. I might not be doing something good here. But it just didn't feel like it was enough. It didn't explain enough to me. It was too, I don't want to say watered down, but it just didn't feel right. Something about it wasn't right to me. I can't tell you what that is. But once I started getting into Gnostic stuff, that's when I was like, okay, this makes sense to me. Because this is how my mind works. I know that shit leads to places. I know that we got here because of this, and Christianity was formed based on, like, the Hermetics. A lot of the things of the Hermetics, like I don't know necessarily if it was their rituals or belief system, I can't tell you, but I know it did influence Christianity quite a bit. And so there's a lot of things inside of that I'm just like, okay, this is what I'm talking about. Gnosticism is always, every time I went down the road with it, I just felt like this makes sense. This is not something that I kind of feel leery about. I think people tend to believe that, like, when Christianity was made, it was by Christ, and then his apostles took it from there. And like, okay, maybe, right? Maybe so. But the idea of the rituals, the idea of what you're doing once you walk into that building, you're looking around like, okay, what do we do now? Well, let's take from things around us. And then you start to see weird shit. In early Rome, this Mithras cult, all of a sudden now it's Christ. It's interesting. It really is. And it's really filled in my head the idea of, like, how we could make all this work in the book. Because, as I say, at the end of the day, the book is essentially is me exploring self, is me trying to find who I am. trying to fix who I am as a person, trying to get better every day in whatever way I feel inadequate. And I want to find my own reasoning. But one of the major things that I get trepidatious about would be sometimes am a little fearful when it comes to being on a journey and searching and looking for something. But there's already a group of people that have something, like a belief system, a concept, or whatever it may be, and just going like, yep, I'll just follow that, and I'll just make whatever they say, I'll do what they say. I feel really trepidatious about that. It's like, what about self? What about self? And so it's really hard for me to go into like already born concepts of already thought ideas, because it's almost like we've already done all the legwork. Just walk in that room, sit there, and whatever we say, just agree to it. That's what any idea feels like. Any idea. Whether it's a religion, whether it's some sort of cultural thing, whether it's some sort of new age concept of what race should be and stuff. It all just feels like, but believe what I say, I've already thought this for you. And I'm just not the kind of person that just walks into that room. You know? It doesn't matter if it's a fucking government type or a goddamn who you pray to. It doesn't feel right to me. So my search has always been of self. And so it's kind of like walking on the outside and looking through the windows and noticing what they're doing in there and saying, well, that's interesting. You know, that's a very interesting way to think of it. Or, wow, I never thought to do it that way. But it doesn't mean like, and I will adopt it. It's just kind of, it's a window shopping of concepts. But you take that information of whatever you see and you just kind of, discern it for yourself. Like, what do I think about this? And how does this influence my life? And in what way could I use this? And they might say that this idea is because of this, but what if I think it's because of that? Whatever. Now, in saying that, led me to this. So, I always struggle with the concept of God. Merely in ways of like hearing other people speak about God and whatever faith they may have. It's always in that fucking vein, you notice? Whenever they have a faith of God, it's always in the idea of what that faith says God is. And I'm just looking at it all and just like, man, everyone's got their own like idea of God and how they think he communes and how they think he wants this and needs that and makes this happen and all this shit, right? It's always in the box. And I'm always just like, man, I don't see it the way they do. I just believe in God. I don't know how to explain it. I have a belief system, but I don't get a lot of messages necessarily. Like, my messages are a little different. And so I kind of was like dwelling on that idea of like how God feels different to me than most people. I don't feel God as this entity that's like, if you don't follow these fucking things that I said you follow, you're getting sent right to fucking hell. You need to believe this, you need to believe that. Like, all this shit that people make up. I'm like, I don't feel that from him. When we commune, or when I don't know, when I feel like he's watching me or some shit. It never feels that way. It just kind of, it just feels like a guy. I don't know how to explain it. Like, he's just here, he's hanging out, and he's just like, hey man, like maybe like fucking try that or something. It doesn't ever feel any more than that. And I'm like, well, that's my concept of him. Like, why does that differ? And does that mean it's not really him? And so I would like debate in my head. I was like, is this really a God? Or am I dealing with something different here? It's hard to tell, right? And then I started exploring stuff. And I started getting into the idea of the messengers of God and like what some faiths would consider the angels, right? Coming from God, like, hey, God told me to tell you to stop doing this, Other faiths have their own belief system, and I don't know it necessarily. But I do know enough to say that there's this, how the pagans would believe, at certain pagan groups, the messenger of the Creator. The messenger of certain gods, being the conveyor of the God, the Creator, whichever one, however many there are, I don't know still. And I kind of was like, this seems to make sense to me. Like, this shit's like really, yes, this makes sense. And then it dawned on me. The way that I find a connection to God, the way it feels different than others, is because I'm looking internally for God. I'm looking into self to find God, not other people's belief systems. Like, okay, let's walk over there in that room. Those people all say, here's God in the room, let's go in there. I'm actually trying to find it in here, me. And so my definition of God, my understanding of him, and my visual concept, if you want to say, is purely my own. The God that I commune with is the God that is directly in contact, if you want to say, or watches over, in some sense, me. So why does my definition differ? Well, that's it right there. It's not. This book here says this is what fucking God is. Let's pretend. This is it. We've discovered it. We read everything. Now, this is hundreds of years of our concepts of God and how he's communed and what he said and the tenets and all that. Here it is. That's God. Just take this. And I just go, okay, no, because that's not who I think God is. I think God is something different than that, because none of that makes sense to me. I don't know how many times I've heard people talk with their Christian beliefs. I don't talk to Jews or Muslims because I don't know any. But what I can hear on the internet and stuff and other people, I'm just like, none of this makes sense to me. This is just not, this seems wrong. Something doesn't feel right about it. I don't know what that is, but it just doesn't feel right. And it's just, what feels right inside. And it's not necessarily a core belief feel right. Like, this doesn't fall in line with my belief system. Like, no, it's just something deep down, gut instinct, first thought, this don't feel right. And so I've always followed that gut instinct. I've always followed that, like, that voice inside. And so for me, the idea of finding God through self, shaping him in the way and curating him in the thought systems that makes sense to me in my life as I'm on my journey to find whatever the fuck I'm looking for. And honestly, the main thing would be self. Looking for self. I've always say this all the time when it comes to this story, in this book that I'm writing, that I'm always trying to find who I am. Eris is always being questioned. He's always being led to a situation where a group of people have some sort of fucking thought, or they believe something, or whatever it happens to be, their minds all gathered in this situation. I'll give you an example. Eris will walk into a room, there's 50 people circled around one guy, and all 50 of these people say, he needs to die, he did something evil. We all agree. We've all just agreed that he should die. And then the guy in the middle there is like, I don't know what the fuck's going on, I didn't do anything wrong, blah, blah, blah. Classic thing. Eris will always be the guy that walks in the room, just like in a video game, and it's like, hey, you, the one that will decide. Kind of stupid shit, right? The reason that I've done that, I mean, yes, there could be influences of modern video games that have done that, of self, and help you identify self and become separate from a mob. But the idea was always because I felt this way. I always felt like outside. When it comes to my friends, I was the guy in the middle, this friend was arguing with that one, and here's me in the middle. Or my parents, when they were, fighting and stuff, I was the one in the middle. Or when we talk about, any kind of social situation, I was always separate because I didn't want to jump into it, so I looked at it objectively on the outside. I didn't have this influence. Or when I discover ideas, like I'm talking about hermetics, and I'm talking about discovering like weird occulty kind of esoteric stuff, I'm not necessarily going to jump into it though. I'm going to be on the outside looking at it and being objective. When I look at Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, when I look at other concepts of culture and ideas, I've never felt inside of it. I've never felt like, yep, this one makes the fucking sense to me. It doesn't matter if 9 out of 10 things this concept says, I go, yeah, that makes sense. I'll still be like, yeah, but I'm not jumping in. I've always found myself on the outside of stuff. And so for me, it always kind of feels like at the end of the day, when I'm in that situation, I always feel like, how do I know what's right? That's always been my struggle. And again, I always take it to Eris because that's the point of these stories. The stories are the mirror of self. So when Eris walks into a situation, he's going to always feel that way. How do I know they're right? How do I know what is right? I don't know how to feel about this. Like, they're so convincing and I want to believe them. Are they tricking me? Am I confused? Because Eris, just like myself, just wants to believe people. He wants to believe that someone's not going to just lie to him. Someone's not going to just say something just to say it or to confuse him or to manipulate him. He doesn't want to believe that. He wants to believe the good in people all the time. And that is something that I struggle with. I'm always trying to find and hear and think the good in people, always. And in the past, as a young man, that led me down some very dark roads, and I got in some trouble with people because I wanted to believe. I'm like, there's no way. I want to believe that they're good. And that's a struggle because you're trying to find who you are. You want to believe who they are. And all these ideas just merely confuse you. So it feels just so jarring to walk around in this world and have any sort of confidence. Like if someone analyzes me as a person and says, man, he lacks confidence. Well, gee shit, I wonder why. Just because it's like so confusing. How do you gain confidence when all you see around you just confuses you? And I've joked about this many times in the past where I'd say, I have this idea with my character. I have this idea with what I'm going to do with the book. But as soon as a little thing comes up and says, yeah, like, what about this? I'm like, well, fuck, I don't know now. Like, yeah, that might come across as zero confidence, but that's how life will feel. I'll be like, yeah, I'm going to believe God. I'm going to believe this concept of God that they've already created, and I'm going to follow with it. And this is perfect. I don't have to think anymore. And then all of a sudden I'm going with it. I'm trying to read the Bible. And then something kind of in the corner of my head, or whatever, in the side of my eye, says something that kind of puts a little doubt in there. And I'm just like, oh, well, I don't know now. I don't want to do this anymore. And I feel like the little kid that just goes home. I'm going home. I can't help that. Like, that's just who I am as a person, and it's always been very difficult for me. The more I walk out into this world, the more I hear the thought of man from any form, whether they say, democracy is the best thing for this reason, communism is the best thing for this reason, and you should believe in this form of Christianity because of that, and this is this, and this culture is the blah, 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 all this shit. People are always telling you stuff. They're always trying to tell you, you should read this book, it's the best book, blah, blah, blah. And you're just sitting there and you're like, it doesn't resonate with me and I don't get it. I don't trust what you're saying anymore. I wanted to, and I struggle, but I can't anymore. I don't trust you. I don't know what you're trying to do. And I find myself getting lost inside of people's faith. When you meet someone who believes in something that's nothing you've ever thought about, and they're so convincing about it because they believe so much that this is fucking it, dude. I fall for that a lot. I'm like, well, fuck, yeah. Like, he sounds so convincing that he believes these things. Maybe he is right. I get lost in that, and I have to kind of separate myself and start thinking more of like, okay, we gotta chill out on some of that stuff. Let's walk away from it and let's kind of refresh our minds a bit, because we could get lost in this, and you could understand why cults form. But then I discover this weird esoteric thing, the egregore I told you about. You remember what the egregore is? You don't? Well, here's a definition. An egregore is a group thought form. It can be created either intentionally or unintentionally. It becomes an entity with the power to influence. A group with common purpose like family, a club, political party, a church, a country create an egregore, for better or worse, depending on the type of thought created in it. And there's ideas and concepts, and we all agree it's this room that we're in. And yes, this is great. And this is where this entity will grow. Now, I think those entities are people's identification of said thing, but when it comes to like theology and God and religion, the egregore they create, they think it's a God. I think that's what's up. So the concept of some sort of group of religion, and then they're like, this is what the Bible says, this is what this is, here's the fucking catechism, whatever. Here's this concept, here's that one, God spoke here, this is what Paul said. I'm like, this is just an egregore. They've made this entity. They called it God. I'm not saying that's what it is, but that's what it feels like as I've discovered this weird esoteric word. That helped me kind of find a base of understanding, and through this egregore, I like think about it more and more, and I'm like, is that the whisper? In my book, remember I told you that there's this entity that it can grow from thoughts. It kind of manifests itself through mankind. It goes through all the different minds as long as you believe in this concept of it, and that's where it can grow and become its own, like a deity and entity. Well, that's a fucking egregore, and I didn't know that when I was making this up. I was like, we've always believed something like this. This is why I'm telling you about this esoteric shit, man. That's why I'm following it, because every time I look in esotericism, I find something that I believed already by myself quietly in this little corner here. I'm like, well, this is clearly fucking it. There's no way. So that's the whisper to me. And this all just, it clicks. Like, it's like when you already have something you made up on your own quietly in your room, and you go over to this weird esoteric shit, and they're like, hey, here it is too. You're like, well, fuck, I have to believe some sense of this because I've already believed it before this. Because the book for me is my religion. And I know that might sound blasphemous to someone, but it fucking is. It's just made up stories wrapped around concepts that I truly believe. And what I think God is, and what I think the whisper, devil, demiurge, whatever you want to say. Demiurge is a whole nother thing we can get into, but let's do that next time, because I just realized something about that yesterday. But it's just, it scares me when we find some of this stuff and it falls in line with esoteric occultist stuff, because I'm like, damn, I don't know, I've always been taught that occults are bad, that they do bad things. And so that's why I'm trepidatiously just walking around it and gathering what they think and kind of seeing things. And if it resonates with me, then okay, but I'm not going to get involved in practices and shit. But that's kind of the thing that I've always been locked into. And their talk of aeon cycles and stuff, I'm like, fucking hell. That's so the book. It just blows my mind, you know? So that's what I wanted to kind of talk about, is my concept of God is one that was curated inside of self. And so from outside of that, I'm kind of looking around the world and just realizing that just, I don't want to believe any of these things. I don't want to ingest any of their culture anymore. You know, I don't want to see anything on the YouTube or the like movies now and stupid people things I can't explain, but you know what it is. It's stupid people shit. Talking about celebrities, talking about, you know, like the new concepts of bullshit that's just being made up, you know, the black supremacy stuff, or the hatred of self when it comes to if you're white or not, the weird ass fucking shit that's going on with like gender and all. Like, I'm not getting involved in that. I'm not getting involved because it's all just bullshit. It's like, this is happening for a reason and no one wants to notice that. They just follow along because it brings the darkness out a bit. And that darkness wants to come out, and I just see that. I'm like, well, this is the real fucking thing to avoid. So it's discovering self and doing this stuff and trying to find who I am and what I am and how I discern things and what I interpret God as. Like, the idea that I want to bring about is, what is God in self? and how discerning that has led me down this weird esoteric path, and wondering who and what and why. We have to get going. We have a long day ahead of us, and we shall see what happens going forward.